Please take a moment to post about today's event on social media using this hashtag. If you are inspired to financially support the YW Boston's vital work today, there's also a QR code and phone number that's located on the bottom right of the floor plan. You can use this to text in a donation and help YW Boston fulfill its mission to eliminate racism, empower women, and build a more inclusive and equitable Boston. Now let's get started. In honor of our 25th anniversary, we will now hear from some past honorees, followed by YW Boston President and CEO, Beth Chandler. Welcome.
And now we have Beth Chandler.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Jessica and Annis, for your introduction and for the work you did to put this event together. Good afternoon again. I'm Beth Chandler, President and CEO of YW Boston, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the 25th Annual Academy of Women Achievers celebration. I want to thank each of you for joining us today. And although we had hoped to celebrate it together, there have actually been some silver linings to doing it virtually. We have been able to make this event larger and more accessible to many. It is through your support that we are able to make this event, today's event, extraordinary. I want to extend special thanks to our gold sponsors, Arbella Insurance Foundation, Aspire Health Alliance, Eastern Bank, Eaton Vance, Northland, Partners Healthcare, PwC LLP, the TJX Companies Incorporated, and Tufts Health Plan, as well as our silver sponsors, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, the EOS Foundation, Fletcher Consulting LLC, Holland and Knight LLP, Maloney Properties, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and North Star Asset Management. We are incredibly grateful to those whose support allows us to work towards our mission to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. YW Boston has been advancing equity for over 150 years. Today, our work focuses on helping organizations create more inclusive environments so that women, people of color, and especially women of color can thrive at all levels. We do this work through our programming. That includes our diversity, equity, inclusion services that propel organizations towards more meaningful racial and ethnic inclusion through targeted strategies at individuals, culture, and institutional levels. Through our cohort-based leadership program, Lead Boston, we help mid to senior level executives strengthen their skills and understanding regarding how to foster a more equitable team, organization, and city. And we are currently accepting applications for this year's class, or for the class of 2021. Many women who are in leadership roles as adults often credit the opportunities they had as young people to lead. So last year, we launched our youth leadership program, the FIRE Initiative, which empowers middle school girls through a curriculum incorporating social justice education, positive identity development, and civic engagement. It is my hope that graduates from the FIRE program will one day be accepting Academy of Women Achiever Awards. And while our programming is important, we know that efforts to create more inclusive environments must address barriers at the local, state, and federal level. So we engage in advocacy work as well. And this year, we are leading an initiative called the Parity on Board Coalition to foster greater gender and racial parity on Massachusetts boards and commissions. And so please reach out to House Ways and Means and encourage them to pass Bill H4153. And this year in particular, it is important for us to come together to recognize and celebrate the contributions of women. The storm winds of COVID-19 have buffeted all of us, yet women, and especially women of color, are among those most impacted by this pandemic. According to the Center for Economic and Policy Research, women make up the majority of the workforce in fields that have been hardest hit by social distancing and COVID-19, particularly retail, hospitality, and education. The majority of women of color have lost hours, experienced a pay cut, and faced unemployment. On top of that, women who are still employed are trying to balance work and caregiving responsibilities. McKinsey & Company found that at least 25% of women are contemplating downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce altogether. The double hit of being both likely to work in industries affected by layoffs, coupled with being main caregivers, will affect women's labor force participation and earnings trajectories for decades to come. 30 years ago, my mother had ascended to a managerial role in a bank where she worked. The climb wasn't easy. Like many women and many women of color, she often saw people who joined the bank after her, or even who she trained, promoted before she was. Yet she persevered. And shortly in her tenure as supervisor, as many of you know, I played basketball in Austria. Well, my second year playing basketball, for my second year playing basketball, I had pneumonia. And I was rushed to the hospital and spent over 2 weeks in the hospital. It just so happened that my second week in the hospital coincided with my parents' already planned trip to come visit me. My mother called her supervisor and said that she wanted to stay a couple of extra days because I was supposed to be released and she wanted to make sure that everything was fine. And her supervisor said, sure, that's fine, but you will no longer be a supervisor when you come back. And so my mother was forced to choose between a job that she worked hard for and loved and her child. No parent should ever have to make that choice. Yet today, we are still asking parents and caregivers to make that choice. We can do better, and we must do better to interrupt this pattern. Organizations across all sectors need to pay women equitably and find creative ways to better support caregivers. At YW Boston, we will do our part by launching the Inclusion Boston Dialogues. This model will help organizations uncover internal barriers for women so that women can be successful in their organizations and not have to choose between a rewarding career and their families. All of this highlights why it is crucial to hold the Academy of Women Achievers every year, and especially this year. Women are not only leading in their frontline jobs, but they are also on the front lines of advancing equity and inclusion in their workplaces and communities. This is often unrecognized and undervalued. We must create spaces to champion Boston's brightest, boldest, bravest, and most influential women. When women succeed, we all succeed. I hope you took the time to watch the amazing videos of our awardees as you waited for the program to begin. We have an outstanding group of awardees being inducted today into the Academy of Women Achievers. Geeta Aiyer, President and founder of Boston Common Asset Management. Deborah Frieze, founder and managing director of Boston Impact Initiative. Makeeba McCreary, Patty and Jonathan Kraft, Chief of Learning and Community Engagement at the Museum of Fine Arts. Rachael Rollins, our Suffolk County District Attorney, and Sheena Collier, founder and CEO of the Collier Connection, who is our third annual Sylvia Ferrell-Jones awardee, named for our late president and CEO. As of today, over 200 women have been recognized at this event during our 25 years. It is an honor and a privilege to continue to build the Academy by recognizing a group of women who have contributed so much of their time, energy, hearts, and minds towards making Boston a more inclusive and equitable city. Now, before we begin with our program, I have two asks. First, please help us make this virtual event the most tweeted about event in Boston over the next 90 minutes. When you hear something inspiring, or when you want to make a shout out during the event, use the hashtag AWA2020 and post on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and any other site you use. Let's bring more people into this conversation and into the work of creating more inclusive environments for women and especially women of color. And remember, I'm competitive, so please, 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 let's make this the most tweeted thing now. And second, we need your support to keep working towards our mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. Our goal is to raise $25,000 during this event. So far, thanks to the generosity of those who have donated when registering to attend and those who have donated when currently online, we have raised over $11,000. Please take a moment during today's program to make a contribution to YW Boston and help us meet our goal of $25,000. And as a reminder, we will give away 5 face masks to engaged attendees. And here they are again. An engaged attendee is somebody who donates to the organization and or somebody who is tweeting about the event. So now I have the privilege of doing the awards presentation. I'm honored to recognize the 25th Academy of Women Achievers awardees who were chosen from over 100 nominations. I will introduce each of you. You will be introduced to them personally when our panel happens with LaToya, but I will provide the awards now. So first, Geeta Aiyer, President and founder of Boston Common Asset Management. Geeta is a social entrepreneur, an activist, a philanthropist, an experienced investment manager, and a leader in global impact initiatives, dedicated to the pursuit of financial return and social change. One article said, Geeta has achieved great success in a field she helped shape, disproving outdated theories that ethics and finance occupy separate worlds. Under Geeta's leadership, Boston Common has built a strong investment record and meaningfully improved the policies and practices of portfolio companies through impactful, proactive share owner engagement. For 4 consecutive years, Boston Common has been rated A+ by PRI, or Principles for Responsible Investing. The firm is also a Best for the World honoree within the Global B Corp community. As if this wasn't enough, Geeta is also co-founder and board chair of Dawn Worldwide, an NGO addressing gender-based violence, and she's also a former YW Boston director. Geeta is a force and one we are proud to have in Boston. Next is Deborah Freeze. Deborah is an author, entrepreneur, and activist. Her award-winning book, co-authored with Margaret Wheatley, Walk Out, Walk On, a learning journey into communities daring to live the future now, profiles pioneering leaders who walked out of organizations failing to contribute to the common good and walked on to build resilient communities. She is a founding partner of the Boston Impact Initiative, an impact investing fund working to close the racial wealth divide in Eastern Massachusetts. How? In the city of Boston, research has found that the median net worth for a Black family is $8. A Black entrepreneur with a network of $8 and limited social capital in a fairly segregated city may have a difficult time finding friends and family to support for startup capital. The Boston Impact Initiative is the Friends and Family. The fund takes an integrated capital approach, combining investment, lending, and grant making to build a resilient and inclusive local economy. Deborah is also founder of the Old Oak Dojo, an urban learning center where neighbors gather to rediscover how to create healthy and resilient communities. We are thrilled to recognize Deborah today.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Makeeba McCreary. Makeeba McCreary has thought about race in Boston her entire life. Most recently, in January 2019, she assumed her role as the Patty and Jonathan Kraft Chief of Learning and Community Engagement at the Museum of Fine Arts. Her leadership team position centers on integrating diverse perspectives into the MFA's programs and educational offerings to foster a better understanding of current issues through the lens of art. Makeeba manages staff across 4 departments in the Division of Learning and Community Engagement, Inclusion, Public Programs, Interpretation and Learning. In her short tenure at the MFA, she has focused on institutional change, and in one interview said of the change, "This is not about amends. It's about our obligations as a public institution. It's about responsibility, about our contribution to the city, about leadership. It's about deconstructing the invisible and visible barriers we have in place. Whether it is giving an entire wing to female artists in Women Take the Floor or Black History's Black Futures, we know that the MFA and the City of Boston benefit from your leadership." As the first woman of color to hold the office of Suffolk County District Attorney and the first woman of color to be District Attorney in any county in Massachusetts, Rachael Rollins has always been a change maker and broken barriers of race and gender. She is the Chief Law Enforcement Official for Boston, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop, Massachusetts, and oversees an office of roughly 300 people, handling approximately 35,000 new cases each year. This is a woman who is unapologetic about taking a progressive approach to criminal justice. She is making important changes with her policy of addressing offenses that are often symptomatic not of criminal intent, but of mental illness, substance use disorder, and poverty, by holding individuals accountable rather than using resources to prosecute and incarcerate offenders. Rachael cares about victims, offenders, the impact of trauma, and the entirety of her community, and we commend her for her extraordinary leadership and work. Our last award is a very special one. The 3rd annual Sylvia Ferrell-Jones Award is given in memory of YW Boston's longtime president and CEO. The award recognizes a young professional woman of color who is a leader in her field and embodies the leadership qualities and commitment to YW Boston's mission of eliminating racism and empowering women that Sylvia so represented. Sheena Collier is a super connector, facilitator, and program developer. Founder and CEO of the Collier Connection and Boston While Black, she is creating an ecosystem in Boston that better connects Black transplants to resources, information, experiences, and each other. She founded these organizations in recognition that Boston is not always an easy place to feel like you can authentically connect with others. Collier Connection also specializes in helping companies to engage new audiences through strategic events and inclusive business practices. Sheena has 15 years of experience in education, communications, economic development, and community organizing, and uses her ability to navigate different environments to broker partnerships within and across sectors. We love the Boston you imagined, Sheena. Sylvia saw your greatness and would be so proud to see you receive this award. Now please welcome LaToya Edwards, Emmy Award-winning anchor on NBC 10, Boston, and Nesson, our MC today.
Okay. Are we on right now? I think we're on right now. Thanks so much. Okay. Hi, everybody. I think you can hear me. Hold on. There we go. That's the only pitfall of a virtual event. The microphone doesn't come on when you want it to. We'll start over. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's event again. 25 years of this annual luncheon. Again, we want to say a big shout out and celebration of the Academy of Women Achievers and the awardees. You are so special. Here in your bio, I'm seeing you say hello. You're saying great energy, Terry. Great energy to you. Thank you so much. Beth, hey, how are you? Miss you, love you. I was speaking earlier about you, and you're my fellow Glamazon. We're both over 5'11". And so when I would normally see you at the luncheon, we'd give a nice big hug. It's nice to see eye to eye with somebody, but in this virtual, we're all eye to eye today. We're sitting down, we're enjoying today's event. So again, you'll hear me be a little breathy because it's all about why we can't not participate in this luncheon, this annual luncheon. We're all drawn to it. 4 years ago, I had the pleasure of being invited to participate. I think I was pregnant or just had a baby. I can't even remember right now, but I loved it so much. I would come every year, even though I would leave my little girl waiting for me outside at school because I had to participate. One year, I remember, we can all joke about it now, I brought my 2-year-old son and had my husband and father babysit in one room in the hotel just so I could be a part of it. Year after year, we're all inspired. 3 weeks ago, the reason why I'm a little breathy, I had thyroid surgery, emergency thyroidectomy. I'm still getting my wind back, but I said I have to be here for today's event because it's important work. We've seen in the news headlines as an anchor for NBC 10 Boston. I know about the importance of empowering women and eliminating racism. It's all over 2020. So let's do the work right now. Let's inspire. You see that message here. Give, text AWA to 617-652-5008. We have to do this work and keep this organization going for another 100 more years. Okay, so I am your moderator for today. And I have a great panel, as you can see. The awardees, we're going to talk about really important issues, especially in this pandemic. You heard the names Geeta, you heard the name Sheena, Deborah, Makeeba, and Rachael Rollins. These women are rock stars. Always the YW Boston, they find the gems of the gems, people who just blow you away with their story. But we're going to dig a little deeper and really hear what they have to say right now. And also, we'll leave a little time at the end for you to submit your questions. And if you see in the chat section that you like a question, you can actually upvote that question. So I want to hear from you. I want you to be a part of this. This is interactive. Do you feel my energy? Can you feel my love? I wish we could be in person, sending you virtual hugs already. Okay, so let's get started. And also, we'll have a chance to win one of these YW masks. But I just took a picture while we were talking. I'm going to tweet it out and put that AWA hashtag. I want you to do the same so you can be a super engaged connector in this event. And maybe you can win a mask. So please be a part of it. Juliet, I see you. You feel the love. I feel the love too. Sydney, yes, the masks are amazing. Tim, hey, how are you? Okay, let's get started. So let's bring the panel right now to discuss this. And I'll just start with Sheena. Sheena, how have you and your organization adapted to meet new diversity, equity, and inclusion challenges brought up by COVID-19? First and foremost, it's beautiful to see you. I feel like I know almost every one of you. Guys look gorgeous today. And so Sheena, talk about that a little bit. How have you had to adapt in bringing the challenges, but deal with the pandemic?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm over here trying to get myself together because that was such a nice words from Beth, and just thinking, being honored in Sylvia's memory really means a lot. She was a very graceful spirit that I am very honored to receive this. But hi, ladies. Congrats to my fellow awardees. And as far as adapting in COVID, so, Beth said a little bit of it in my intro, but for folks that don't know, I'm a very in-person person. Like, I like to connect with people in person. I actually started, one of the reasons I started what I was doing was because I thought we were too reliant on technology, though today's remote event is making me rethink if I ever want to do an in-person event again. And so I had to pivot really quickly and figure out, if I could continue to do the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years. And what I found very quickly, within 2 weeks into COVID, is that people were, this is a time where we were all very confused. Some of us probably still are, about what was happening. And so people connection. And I researched some platforms very quickly and figured out how to make sure we can still build community in this time. And it's proven to be very necessary. We continue through Boston While Black specifically to build the membership. We have 100 people now and 1,000 on the waiting list because people are really in this time just want to find each other. And so I'm hoping that as we hopefully come out on the other side of this, some of the things that have happened in this time that we probably didn't think could happen before, I'm hoping we can continue on them, such as the ways we've been able to lift some policies or laws or put together programs that maybe in the past seemed impossible. So though a very stressful time and concerning and even devastating for many of us, also a time where I feel like a lot of innovation has come out of it, and hopefully we can continue down that pathway of supporting each other.
Absolutely. Makeeba, hi, how are you? Great to see you.
Latoya.
Hey, happy birthday to your son, Gary. So I want to talk briefly with you because I know the museum is just a magical place, and partly because of you, I had the pleasure with your invitation to cover that Black History Month exhibition with the high schoolers. That was phenomenal. For folks who haven't been, you have to go. But COVID-19, how do you adapt to that? How do you bring people in safely? What are you doing? And then the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, how'd you make that work?
You know, I think actually there was a blessing in disguise with the push to have to think about what you do outside of the museum. And so we were really lucky as a museum to think about partnering on public art. And so I think folks know that we were able to support a mural in part with the city at Madison Park High School. And it's just sort of evolved from there, but it's really reinforced the idea that our relationship with the community that's around us and the neighborhoods around us and the artists that are around us does not have to be stifled by the walls that are around this museum. I think the equity work, the inclusion work, again, you know, technology does provide sometimes a way to take out a barrier. And so we've been able to continue to talk to all of our partners in the Boys and Girls Clubs and other community organizations that are youth serving. And then we got out in my backyard and put together art kits and dropped off Ziplocs. And, you know, you get creative because you realize, I think similar to what Sheena said, that that your service is actually critical, even more so in times like this when the city is just, you know, becomes sort of paralyzed and a bit lost. So I feel really good about the way that we've been able to show up.
Oh, me too. And I was rooting for you, and I'm so happy that, you know, you start to think outside the box, and folks really ride with you and they want to be innovative. So Deborah, I see you're about to take a sip. Go ahead, take a sip of your water. I was going to come to you. You take a sip of your water. This is casual.
I'm going to do it too.
Hey, listen, I have my Google cup here. All right. So, yes, Geeta. So Deborah, let's talk about inclusivity. And I know people hear that word and some will say it's a buzzword, but really for folks who are here listening right now and who want to know more, why? What is the value? Break it down on a basic level. Why is that still so needed in this time?
It seems so strange, right? That our dominant culture that most of us, that we swim in, is still managing to maintain the illusion that we are separate from one another, right? That we are, somehow there's a narrative in dominant culture that we are by nature competitive, selfish, and separate. And I think of this as sort of like an economics or a politics or a culture of separation, except that most of us know in our heart of hearts, women know, people of color know, and white people know and often forget that we are by nature cooperative, generous, and interdependent. That actually we have in our hearts an economics of relationship, which recognizes that our fates are tied up together, and that if you don't do well, I don't do well. Now, everything that we've structured institutionally is not that. We've structured more separation, accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few at the expense of the many. But we can see in this time, more than ever, the outcomes for all of us are tied together. We're all doing poorly now at a health level. At an economic level, the divide is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that goes back to some of the things that Sheena said about policy that needs to change, and the way the finance industry is structured that both Geeta and I work on. I don't do well if you don't do well. We understand that in some parts of our culture, but institutions are not doing that. And so today, as we move toward a new majority country by 2024, we're going to be a new majority country. And if we don't become more inclusive, we are headed toward economic apartheid in the United States of America. Inclusion is essential, it's urgent, it's economic, and it's about ownership and control of assets, buildings, land, and the means of production. And we have to have communities of color and women have those asset building abilities in their hands.
Well, Deborah, it's so funny that I put that question specifically to you because I looked at your bio here, and every one of you have, it's like a Shiro story, okay? And it's your superheroes. Let's just acknowledge it. So, Deborah, in your bio, it said that you talked about the book that you wrote, Walk Out, Walk On, a learning journey into communities daring to live the future now, profiling pioneering leaders who walked out of organizations, failing to contribute to the common good and walked on to build resilient communities. So 2020, we know, we've all managed to endure it. 2021, we're not going to, I can't get political. You can do whatever you want to do. But how do you see, no matter who wins or loses on the basic community level, how do we find that community? How do we come together? This pandemic will still be here. How do we get that? How do we pull the curtain back and see you and me? We can acknowledge what makes us different, but how do we see each other and make it right?
I don't see any way around not being in direct personal relationships with each other. And right now, that's not how most of our culture is structured, right? So the city of Boston, we live in segregated neighborhoods, many of us. We live in workplaces that aren't diverse. And even when they are diverse, there's a difference between diversity that is composition and diversity that is power and voice. And so the way that the question I think we need to look at in 2021, which is first, who's in the room? And second, who has power in the room? Whose voice is in a decision-making or influential position? So I work in the finance industry, and the question that we're in is how do we cultivate a pipeline of fund managers of color and women? Because we know that when fund managers of color and women are the ones making decisions about the allocation of capital, entrepreneurs of color and women will be the ones receiving that capital. There's no way around that. And so I think it's about starting to change who has power, who has voice, who has influence, and recognizing that our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives cannot just be visual. It really has to be shifting the power quotient, and that includes, for example, in both for-profit and nonprofit entities, setting term limits so we change who has power.
Geeta, I would love to connect with you. This is my first time meeting you. And again, your story is so exciting. And Rachel will include you in the conversation as well.
Will you? Thanks.
Yeah.
I got stuff to do. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, okay. So you both are in fields where you're often the one and only in that space. What have you done to support your growth and development and shift the space? Geeta, we'll start with you.
So I was always struck by the fact that despite the palpable advantages that women and people of color bring to the table as investors, as investment managers, the fact that they have this unique ability to keep many factors and considerations in mind, the ability to take very bounded risks, and the ability to manage with resources that are limited to achieve so much. And yet we are never at the table. So as an immigrant, I often felt that I was not only an immigrant to the country, I was also an immigrant to the whole field of finance, which didn't have women and people of color at the table. So stunningly to me, that number actually has been declining. Women used to be 14% of money managers, and in 2000 and in 2019, they've fallen to 11%. And then when they leave these big firms and actually start their own firms, women and people of color led or owned firms have 1.3% of 70 trillion in assets under management. So I'm going to support what Deb said, which is that we need more intentional leaning in. However, what I believe we bring as strengths and which we can use to navigate this is resilience and resourcefulness. I think of it as like the immigrant's toolkit that we need to reach into. We are now going to be immigrants into a future that does not look like our past. Deborah spoke about the new majority, the fact that we will have many more opportunities and indeed different challenges based on the exceptional crises that face us, that are cumulative and that need to be addressed, whether it's climate change or inequality and without mobility or separation and segregation. So we have a set of challenges that we must tackle, or our society and our economy is at risk. We are tearing apart the fabric of our society. So I look at it as a new tomorrow into which we can come in with the strengths that we bring: resourcefulness, resilience, finding a way to connect with each other. And indeed, I would argue, networking with professionals who are of a different generation. It is often something that young people never get told. We used to always be told network, and it meant going out with others who were just like you, and connecting with each other. And I feel like the importance of that is key. I also think there's a new intentionality, and this will play out a little bit. We can't afford to let up or believe or accept that we must only drive in our own lanes. That day is over, and that we just need to forge ahead with the full wisdom, bringing our full personality into the table. We can't afford to have women be fake men anymore. We just have to be leaning in with our whole selves into this.
Here. I mean, I wish I could record that and just play that whenever I'm driving into work and a little tired this morning, and say, forge ahead, be resilient, be resourceful. Thank you so much, Geeta. Rachel, I want to get your take on that same question, because, I mean, I think part of what people were attracted to you being in this role as the District Attorney of Suffolk County and being the top law enforcement official, enforcement of laws in Boston, is the fact that you come at it with a really fresh perspective, a bold perspective. You take on empowerment of women and eliminating racism in your role, but law enforcement and the community sometimes can clash. We've seen that. How do you see yourself, especially being a woman of color? How do you make that all work?
So I think it is, hearing about people walking out of organizations, there's a new movement of people saying, you aren't giving me opportunities, so I'm taking them, right? Like, people look at me and say, like, oh my gosh, you've ascended to this powerful place. No, nobody gave me this, I took it. So power is never given. It is, and if it's given, it's usually fake power. So make sure that you're don't get fooled with the okey doke, right? So instead of walking out of an organization, like we've heard earlier, I said that organization that impacts my community more than any other community we have seen, right? I defy you to find a place where the criminal legal system, the number of people that touch it who are poor, Black, brown, immigrant, and other, quote unquote, are exorbitantly high compared to the individuals making the decisions. And the individuals making the decisions are the police, the DAs, the judges, probation, all of those different entities, none of which have people that look like me in them. And Black women, in fact, are the most impacted, because if it is our family members that are incarcerated, right? And we are too. It is not just Black men that are killed by the police. Ask, Breonna Taylor, right? Ask several other individuals that have experienced that harm themselves or trauma. So the perspective is very new, and law enforcement is, overwhelmingly male and like dominantly male, and, aggressively male. So when I walk in the room as the chief law enforcement officer of Suffolk County, it is a massive change, not only because I am a visible person of color, but because I'm a woman. And what we've seen in COVID-19, which all of you have touched base on, but it's Black and Latinx communities that are overwhelmingly testing positive at exorbitantly higher rates. In Chelsea, for example, immigrant communities that are, the elderly, our veterans, right? So irrespective of color, we look at what has happened with respect to our veterans facilities, and they are dying in droves and being failed there. But I think for me, when I look at crimes that are happening now with respect to domestic violence and child abuse and the increase there with all of us at home. Some of us, we are privileged and we can Zoom into our meetings. Our essential workers, we've always known, are police, fire, and EMS. We now know they're also people who work in supermarkets.
Yes.
People who work in hospitals, not just doctors and nurses and anesthesiologists and others, but the individuals that are giving you care when you are lying in a room needing help, but they can't Zoom into their jobs, right? They have to show up and they are at risk when they do it. So I want to be a loud voice to say many of these domestic violence and child abuse cases, home is the place where they're harmed. School and work is where they get their respite and their freedom, right? And their ability to either have a 51A filed on their behalf when they see it. So it's incredibly complicated. I'm not saying men don't recognize that, but a lot of women who have either themselves raised their siblings, right? Or been mothers themselves or not, right? Or have experienced abuse, which I hope people haven't. We have a lived experience that's different, that we speak differently about those issues, and we make sure we bring them to the table every time we speak.
Yes. I was looking as you were speaking, Brianna Aloiso wrote about disrupting the rooms. And so I'm looking at all of your faces and there's some common themes that you're expressing, and I see you nodding your head as each speaks. I wonder, and I would love for each of you to speak to this. Now I'll call you and you can jump in if you want. How, Deborah, and each person can talk about this. How have you, because each one of you have disrupted rooms, how do you have the courage? How do you have the fortitude to walk into the room, be uncomfortable yourself, but still forge ahead with your plan that maybe many people aren't interested in at first? Deborah, I'll have you start.
I have to say that I when I look at what's happening and I look at being a person of privilege in this culture, it seems shocking not to have the courage to act. And it's something when I look at, I was on, so I work with Black and Latinx entrepreneurs in the city of Boston. More than 50% of Black entrepreneurs are likely to permanently close their businesses by the end of this year. Less than 20% of white business owners are likely to do that. Everything right now is stark. COVID is this great amplifier and accelerator of all things unequal in our culture. And when I think about the privileged position I sit in, the courage is, it doesn't even feel like I'm the one being asked for courage. When I look at what people are doing to persevere, to survive, to struggle, and how partnership and allyship is how do we not do that? And yet we do that, it happens all the time. So when I think about like the courage, I look at the women in this group and I see the courage and everybody looks smooth, right? It's so hard. It's so exhausting. I was on the phone yesterday with a very sophisticated Latina entrepreneur with a great technology platform. It's her third enterprise. And she said to me, she's like, I know that female entrepreneurs get less than 3% of all venture funding last year. And I know that Latina entrepreneurs got less than 1%. And yet I'm doing this. To Rachel's point, we have to be at the table. We have to create the opportunity. And those of us who have some privilege have to partner, especially with unstoppable women. I'm pretty sure most women are unstoppable, actually. I just so persevering. We have to partner and engage. And the best thing to do is from my world, invest in female-led enterprises, seek out female investment advisors, and always maintain an intersectional lens, understanding you cannot look at race only or gender only. We have to look at the intersection of race and gender and support women of color in particular.
Makeeba, when I think about you walking into the NFA, Museum of Fine Arts had a really hoity-toity reputation, had a history of maybe or an allegation of racial problems, and you walk in like, okay, I'm together, here I am, you see me, I got it, here are the answers. And we've talked privately about how people may not have responded initially so excited to see you, staff members, but you walked in and you made the change and it may have been uncomfortable. How do you do that? How do you disrupt the room?
Right. I mean, I want to respond to your very first question by just immediately saying, like, I don't know how you don't have a choice. Like, there's too much at stake. The consequences of us not walking in the room, each of us, all of us, and everybody who's on the rest of the screen, it's our responsibility. And so I don't necessarily feel courageous. Most of the time, actually, I do feel tired and a little scared. And
I love you. I love you.
And, you take a deep breath and you say, okay, what's the consequence if I don't say this? What is the consequence if I don't, try to figure out how to, bring allyship? But, before we closed, we had a session here with Thelma Golden, who is the leader of the Studio Museum in Harlem. And she said something that I think has stayed with me and continues to remind me. A lot of folks, Rachel in particular, are dealing with systems, right? And I've dealt with systems, I've dealt with policy, but there's also the individual level. And Thelma said, institutional culture is not created by bricks and mortar. It is created by the people in it. And so it's all of our responsibilities. And I will have to say, I did not walk in here and flip a switch and do this by myself. Like, I have many, many colleagues who actually had already started chipping away before I arrived. Ancient Nubia Now had been in play for years. The Basquiat exhibition that's on right now, years. I walked into fertile ground, is what I would say. Not necessarily, seeded ground, but definitely fertile. And there are many, many people here who I consider allies, not just allies, but, accomplices in this work. But being a woman of color, for sure, is a whole different animal. And I would say that has to be acknowledged, that yes, Rachel, go ahead, take over.
I love this. And hearing her say accomplices, I take it up a notch, right? So Deborah, I love allyship and partnership. I need an unindicted co-conspirator, right? And you might not be lawyers, but what I need is somebody who is not just whispering to me or texting me like, you're doing a great job, right? When I'm taking roundhouse kicks to the face, in the media and everywhere else, speaking out to our governor, to our, secretary of other things. And I have no personal dislike of these individuals, but when we have over 80 Superior Court judges in Massachusetts and only 3 of them are Black, I have to say something out loud about that, right? I guarantee you, any of you set foot in a courtroom today and count who the defendants are that are coming out behind that plexiglass area, they don't look like Deborah. A few of them might, right? But not nearly as many. And so I will say, partnership and allyship, I want that, but I want unindicted co-conspirators. I don't want just Black faces, and thank you, Deborah, saying the things that we are saying. I want to hear other people saying it. When we talk about that intersectionality, when we think about the civil rights movement did wonders for Black men, and the suffrage movement did wonders for white women. Where am I, right? Like Makeeba, Sheena, Geeta, myself, we are left with this. I'm sorry, we have both of these issues. We are holding all this up on our shoulders, and nobody is giving us, this sort of movement for us in that moment. And then the last thing I'll say about culture and art, which, believe me, I will leave all this to Makeeba, but recently it became aware to me, like, we aren't on money, right? I know younger people watching this are like, what's money, right? I know they only use like everything's on your phone and you don't, but I grew up, I'm 49. I grew up with money. We aren't on money. We aren't the emojis. There aren't Black emojis on like Android phones. So when people, I know it's silly and it's like, oh, it's just an emoji. Everything is skewed to white. And yet Black people, we are the most culturally appropriated people on the planet, but of course get blamed for our murders and, sucked dry of all of our delicious magicness, right? Like I like to say when I'm in meetings like this, every white woman that put bronzer on and plumpers and is getting other things injected to make you round, that's us, right? And meanwhile, we are like despised, hated, and looked at as if we are other than or less than in every day, but of course, like sucked dry of our very essence in every moment. So for me, like Makeeba, I'm not sitting silently on this. I'm also, generously explaining this to people now, because the other thing I like to say, if I have to explain to you that there's systemic racism, you need to go back from wherever you're from and educate yourself, because we are now in 2020. And if you don't get that, move somewhere else, right? Like, and learn quietly in silence, and then come back and join the rest of our society then.
You just made me almost cry like 3 times. I'm going to try and be professional and not cry, but suck dry and all of that. Thank you so much. Sheena, you got to jump in because, my sister, I've seen you make moves. I've seen you behind the scenes and in Dorchester doing the work and leading youth and leading so many multi-generational. Answer the question yourself. You sort of make being uncomfortable, making other folks who are not woke or aware or don't want to acknowledge it be uncomfortable with your movement. You're never silent about it. And I'm sad that you covered up your afro because I wanted to see it today. So go ahead.
Well, Black Girl Magic, it's not the best hair day, but so I come from a long line of women who are disruptors in their own lives, and Black woman who was raised in, I was nurtured at Spelman, challenged at Harvard, and really stepped into my power in Boston. And so I know that the access that I've been given is not just for me. The knowledge I've been given is not just for me. The relationships I've been blessed to build are not just for me. I'm carrying on the work of my ancestors, and I never forget that. And so as Makeeba and Rachel have mentioned, I do this work scared, very, very scared. I'm in rooms where no one in my family or friend circle has ever been. So I know it's up to me to speak on their behalf and open up access and doors. And I'm walking in my purpose, and I'm very clear about that. I know what my mission is here, and that's a very it's a very good place to be in. And so when I am, even today, literally before we got on this event today, I've had conversations that scared the crap out of me, but it's what I'm here to do. And I spent a long time, even though folks have seen me, I've been in Boston 16 years and I've been doing different iterations of this work the whole time I've been here, but I questioned myself for a long time. And I kept looking around saying like, well, who's supposed to do this? And eventually I was like, it's me. Like, it's on you to make some of this stuff happen in partnership with the women on here on the stage with me and others in the city. So, similarly, I just think it's an imperative. It's on me. I think that when you have a purpose to do something, you can't walk away from it. Even when you try to hide from it, it will always come back to you. The opportunities will keep presenting themselves to you. And so I just know that Black people need me, and I genuinely feel that. And I know that in particular, Black women need me to be someone that they can see stepping into these spaces, a lot of times white spaces, to speak on our behalf. And yeah, I really think it's just what I'm here to do. And so I'm grateful for the other women and other people I meet along the way who are also doing this very scared, because it lets me know that I'm moving in the right direction. Ooh. And that I don't have to. Courage is not about not being scared of it. It's about doing it anyway.
You know what? You guys are all unapologetically delicious right now. And that just came to me. I'm like, ugh, this is why I love this event. Even virtually, it's outstanding. Okay, so, we have to talk.
I know we're going to hear from Geeta, but I just want to say just one quick thing, which is I truly believe that if you are not afraid, it is not worth it. Like, if there's no fear, if there's nothing that is at the other side, then you shouldn't be doing it. And so I just wanted to tag on to Sheena in that phrase.
Yeah.
I love that, especially because when you said, well, go ahead, Geeta, because when you
not at all. I just have been enjoying and absorbing all the fabulous comments. So it's like watching master craftsmen and wondering where I can fill in a few details that I've left out. Thank you so much. But I just wanted to add a couple of things. One is that you should know at least in my field, I feel like you should know that it is not performance, as in results, that is holding women back or people of color back. It what we've all been talking about, structural barriers, implicit bias issues. So if you know that, then both when you're putting your own hat in the ring, don't look at it like asking for a favor. And on the other side, when you have the opportunity to support someone, don't let the put down happen in front of you. So in this moment of anti-racism, I feel like I want to add anti-genderism to it and say that we have a full-on tackle that we can take on, because these stereotypes, these myths persist beyond our own time, and we cannot be, again, silence is complicity. I just want to raise that out. And then the second is to support the idea that there are indeed allies elsewhere, and we should not assume that it is us versus them at all times, and that I would love to believe that I'm goal-oriented enough to say I go and talk to the most unlikely, potential allies, because we want to make, in my work on gender-based violence as well, I've been looking to think of bystanders who can be upstanders, who are not going to watch and just not do anything, and how to empower them, because it is by changing the vast majority, not just ourselves, that we will achieve this change. And so we have to be able to reach to the other side. And then the one last thing I wanted to add is that as important as it is to meld in, I always thought that I would pick my battles, and I would cut my hair really short so it wouldn't curl. I would wear exactly the, suit, bow tie, pumps, nylons, everything to show up at a presentation. And I worked on my speech. I did so many things to fit in. And at the end of any presentation, someone would come up to me and say, my niece's best friend is an Indian. And I would think, oh my God, you heard, because I did all this so they would hear what I had to say. And at the end of it, they've seen me, and I'm not sure if they heard me. And of course, I would be tempted to say, look, India has 1 billion people and half of them are females. So the odds of my knowing your niece's best friend is very low. But what I valued is that they were trying to reach out to me. They were trying to connect with me. They were trying to say, I see you and I still want to reach out to you, even as I was trying to become invisible and be heard. And I thought that invisibility was the path to being heard. So this to me was a big learning. I am constantly wowed by the structural barriers, but the personal openness of people. And I feel like there is something beautiful there that we can use to be support for us and allyship for us.
Well, I know we're supposed to have questions from the audience. Okay. So yeah.
Latoya, can I say one thing? So
please.
What I'm always fascinated about, Geeta, though, is men are always promoted on promise and potential, and women of just women, capital W, of all types, it's like, show me the receipts, to quote Whitney Houston, right? I need the receipts of where, prove to me you've done this before. And it's like, whoa. And then it exponentially increases when you add the other, right? Other women, I'm an immigrant woman, I'm a woman of this, I'm of that, LGBTQ, whatever it is. And so I agree with you. Can we, Deborah, how in a room, right? I don't need this, because I have no problem being like, I'm muting you, sir, and I am taking control of this meeting. But walk us through, please, how allyship, unindicted co-conspiratorship can say when we hear, these women are going for this position, and have they ever? I like to point out, I'm sorry, is the current person in that job, had they ever done it before? Or the 40 men that got that position and have learned on the job there? Well, the times are different now. Are they? I mean, they are, but I get it, right? What would you say, Deborah, about that?
Well, so it's exactly what happens.
Oops, you're muted.
Am I muted?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Geeta
nope, you're perfect.
More than anyone, which is, you go into a foundation's investment committee who says, no, I can't bet on that fund manager of color, that woman fund manager, because it's a first time fund and there's no track record. And then, yes, I bet on hedge funds and private equity funds at first glance and I lost all my money, but that still doesn't mean I'm going to bet on this woman. So we know that in finance and in entrepreneurship, most investing is about taking some risk. and we take risk on white men. So I don't know how to change that, Rachel. I only know how to build an alternative. And so for me, this is the whole thing of walk out, walk on. I don't know how to change the minds. And I feel like it's beating our heads against a wall sometimes. However, building a fund made up all of, women-led, people of color-led, majority community-based organizations governed to make decisions about the allocation of capital, then going to 11 other communities around the country and building a pipeline of fund managers of color and women to do the same thing, and then building up the alternative so that investors have a choice. And the investors who've come into our fund, and the investors who are looking to do this are millennial and women.
Yeah.
And so there's no question to me. I know that I so am grateful for those of you who do go into the big systems and do the big fight. And I think that's part of the work. And there's another part of the work, which is that system can't be fixed. It's extractive, it's exploitative, it's accumulative, and it's built around, look, our form of American capitalism is built around white supremacy. Can we use the tools of finance and entrepreneurship to build an inclusive, regenerative economy that redistributes wealth and power? I think we can. I know it's small. I think we have to create small efforts that connect and include all the folks that are aligned in it and pull people over through attraction, like just seduce them to the better way rather than beating our heads against a wall that I don't know how to win at.
Okay, so we have a
Deborah's invited to my cookout, by the way. I just putting it in the chat. Deborah, you are invited to my cookout. Go ahead.
Thank you.
So we got some questions from participants, and I think we've answered some of it, but this was actually upvoted. Here's a question. When you do speak up and no one listens, how do you stay vigilant in making good trouble, especially when you're in a power dynamic and get boxed out if you're a troublemaker? I'll leave it open. Who has any advice about that?
I think that one thing that's certainly a common thread that is maybe obvious, but I think needs to be said is that on the screen are women, including you, Latoya, who have the ability to make decisions, right? Like, so leadership is not actually leadership if you are still experiencing, what you just described, although all of us do experience that still.
Yep.
But, I have to say that Matthew Teitelbaum created this position at the MFA and placed it on the leadership team. So signal to the rest of the world that this is somebody who's going to have decision-making and ability and be contributing to the future of this institution, but also internally, empowers me to be able to participate at the table and to contribute and to say, I actually have an opinion. But I think what whoever just asked that question raises is why we all say you get tired, because it's not that we all have been in a position where we are in leadership roles where we have decision-making ability. We often have been in leadership roles where actually that was a farce, right? Like, you had a title and you had a portfolio and that was a show, that was just cover. So I think, finding folks like us, there are lots of us out there, by the way, who are willing to pull you aside and say, actually, this is how you navigate a white male world. Because that's really what we're navigating, as Deborah has said. And, it's different. It's a different world and there's different rules. But we can follow those rules too. It's surprising to people when we do it. It's jarring, right? Then we fall into, a whole other trap of what Black women and women of color are labeled when they don the sort of white male persona. But it is effective oftentimes to get you to a place where you then walk into a room, as Rachel does, and you get on a Zoom and you hit the mute button when you are saying, I do not invite that. That is not what we're going to do today. It changes the dynamic.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I love saying, I reject that premise, right? So even the questions that I get that start with this premise of where we're starting the question, I now want to be like Neo in the Matrix, right? Where I'm like, there is no spoon and I don't need to answer that, right? We're shifting and pivoting, right? We're pivoting to this thing. But, for me, I look at this group and feel inspired, right? That there are different leaders in different industries disrupting, right? For me, anything I say even though people think I'm like off the cuff, off the rip, throwing things, I have to be right? Because the problem is men get the opportunity to fail and like fall upwards into like, oh, now I'm the CEO. This is amazing. Whereas like women and women of color in particular, it's like you're just as good as your last thing, right? Like, so, or only as good as your last thing, or we won't even look at your last thing, right? So for me, everything I say, like it takes a lot of work to get to where we are. Like this is, and it's something beautiful that Congresswoman Presley said when Liz Miranda, Nika Elogardo, Ayanna Presley, and myself all won, and they were like, oh, it was just magic. It's like, no, fool, this isn't magic. It's hard ass work is what it is, right? Each of us worked our knuckles to the bone to get to where we were. We had to Andy Dufresne through a mile of, Shawshank Redemption escapism to get to where we were. Stop pretending this was just a little fairy dust sprinkled on us. So when I request that the governor diversify our Supreme Judicial Court, which we saw the other day, he just appointed Justice Kim Budd as the Chief Justice, first Black woman in the history of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our court is 328 years old. It is the oldest court in our hemisphere, right? So that wasn't just put some damn Black people on. No, it is a 4-page, beautifully worded letter with data and analysis, and it is crafted well. Like, we have to make sure that we are speaking not only their language, but making sure we're backing it up with data in support.
Amen. Rachael Rollins, Sheena Collier, Makeeba McCreary, Geeta Aiyer, Deborah Frieze, thank you a million times over. I'm just one person who was blown away, inspired, and I'm going to take all of what you said and go start some trouble. I have to go back to work. No. You guys, I know for the people who watched and listened, men and women have been blown away and are going to move forward. You are so rightfully deserving of being inducted into the Academy of Women Achievers. You are, I know hero is an overused word, but you just leaders, and you just make it happen. And it's not magic, it's hard work, and you are unstoppable. And I can't wait to see what you do and how you disrupt and how you make good trouble as you continue on in this 2020 and beyond. So thank you again for being on our panel. Congratulations, cheers, we love you, bravo. And for those who are watching right now, I'm gonna wrap up my part and actually read their script, which I haven't done at all. I want to thank you, big congrats. Before I send it back to your table for the quick discussion, make sure you make your gift if you haven't, get a chance to watch any of the recorded remarks. We wanted to raise $25,000. I've been to other events. That is such a small amount, but I know times are tough. But you have to think about this. And that when we're in these times, you have to invest in things that we know will give dividends back. And investing in women, empowering them, and investing in eliminating racism is something that we have to do. Again, text to AWA, text AWA to 617-652-5008. That's what you can do to help raise $25,000. Thank you for your time. I'm Latoya Edwards. Mayor Walsh, I know, is going to have some remarks, and I'll send it back over to whoever's running the show. I'll see you next year, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Latoya. Great job. Thank you, Latoya.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. That was a fabulous discussion. And I want to thank Latoya for your expert moderation. I want to give you a virtual hug since we usually get to do it in person and can't do that today. And a hug to all the other recipients because I would have hugged you too. And also, Latoya said she was blown away. I think everybody who listened to that conversation was blown away. And I certainly know that I want to hear the recording because there were so many gems that came out of that conversation that I think we all need to think about and rehear and think about how we connect with one another and how we're going to move forward. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Boston's 54th mayor and a friend of YW's, Mayor Martin J. Walsh.
Thank you very much, Beth, and everyone at YW. Latoya, that panel was inspiring. That was phenomenal. I caught the last 15 minutes of the conversations, such incredible, powerful speakers, and I'm going to get to you guys in a minute and thank you. But I want to first of all thank YW on 25 years, your anniversary. You are such an important part of this city in so many different ways. The young people, the skills, the confidence, the sense of community that you help them, allow them the opportunity to thrive in their life. You are helping us lead a culture shift, breaking down barriers for women. Today, we had a meeting this morning about the coronavirus and the impacts on women right now, and the loss of jobs and the loss of so many different losses. The impacts are going to be felt for a long time, and YW has been amazing in addressing any disparities. So I want to thank you, and certainly we're going to be looking for your help again here in the city of Boston as we continue to move out of this COVID-19 crisis that we're in. I want to thank you for helping bringing real positive change in our city, advancing racial justice, empowering women in the workplace. It's an honor to carry out this work with you and to be able to work with you every day that we do. I want to give a big congratulations to the panelists that were just on. They're amazing. Geeta and Sheena and Deborah and Makeeba, who I worked with for many years, and District Attorney Rollins. All of you are certainly leaders and inspirations and powerful examples, and I want to thank you for continuing that. That's something that in the time that we're in today, now is the time to continue to move forward. So thank you for all the great work you do. Thank you for being recognized in this, well, congratulations actually, for being recognized in this very special way, but thank you honestly for all the work you do. It's no surprise to me that these leaders are certainly being inducted into the Academy of Women Achievers. As you heard, they're unstoppable forces who are leading our city towards a more equitable and inclusive future. So I want to thank you. And again, I want to congratulate all the honorees, YW Boston as a whole. I'm looking forward to you coming together. And thank you everyone for supporting this incredible organization. And the last thing I'll say, Latoya talked about it, is really about support. The financial support is so important for YW. And whatever you can do would be appreciative. Thank you very much and have a great, blessed day.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh. And thank you, everybody who has contributed so far today or in buying your ticket. We are up to $17,000. We have $8,000 to go. I know we can get there. So please support as you can. I want to share that we have several recipients for the face mask so far. We have Dave Manzo, who sent out the first tweet. You go, Dave. Jill Stanton and Brianne Bowen. And I'll announce several others when I get to the end, which won't be too long. So over the past few months, we have reflected on 25 years of hosting this event. And we want to make sure that the Academy of Women Achievers is inclusive and equitable moving forward. So there are so few spaces to recognize women accomplishments in Boston, especially women of color. It is important for us to take steps to make sure that that happens. So we have created a gender inclusion statement, which is as follows. The Academy of Women Achievers wishes to recognize all those who identify as women, including transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, polygender, and gender non-conforming people, whose key gender identity, experience, and internal perception on the spectrum of gender is women. YW will continue to recognize and honor those considered some of Boston's brightest, boldest, bravest, and most influential. And additionally, we will track the ethnic and racial identities of our awardees to ensure we center our goal of recognizing more women with underrepresented identities. I hope while you were watching the 2020 awardees videos and listening to that fantastic panel, that you thought of women in your workplace or community who would be a great fit for the Academy of Women Achievers. You're in luck. We have officially begun to accept nominations for our 26th annual event to be held next year, hopefully in person. I know you saw Latoya's energy on the screen. You can't imagine it in person. I ask that you please visit ywboston.org/AWA to find our nomination form, and please join us again next year. We also have a number of exciting events coming up before the end of the year. In November and December, we will host our 2020 Elevating Live series. The first one on November 12th is going to focus on making caregiving work. And the second on December 2nd is going to talk about the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how to sustain organizational change. And we're going to have people speaking about accountability statements their organizations made and how they can make sure that they're going to be not just statements on a page, but things they actually do. We also will hold our annual meeting on November 17th. We'd love for you to join us and hear more again about our work, as well as hear from Dr. Candice Nicole Hargens, Director of the Center for Healing Racial Trauma. She's going to be our keynote speaker, and we'll talk about how trauma and racism interconnect. I hope to see you at all of our upcoming events, and we'll also introduce our 3 new board members at that November meeting. There are a number of ways that you can continue to engage with our work. Our Lead Boston program is still accepting applications for the class of 2020 through November 6th. Our advocacy committee is looking for new members as well, and applications are up on our website. Please feel to apply for that. And again, as I mentioned, we are hoping to raise $25,000 for this event. You can continue to give both through the event, and when the event ends, you can go out and give after that as well to get online. We'd really like to hit that $25,000 goal today. And once again, we appreciate the support of our sponsors and host committee who have made this possible. I also want to thank the YW staff. This was a different platform for us, and there was a lot of work, particularly by Dominique, Annie, and Jake, to make sure things ran smoothly. So thank you to the YW staff, and again, the sponsors and host committee. I also want to announce our last 2 recipients of our face masks. We have Yasmin Cruz and Gary Bailey, so thank you to you both. And again, I want to end by saying, as Rachel said, go out and be unindicted co-conspirators for this work. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, and go make us inclusive. Thank you.